Chapter 1. The king paced his throne room with deeply unroyal anxiety. He longed for his queen with a passion known only to royals, or so the fairy tales say. Since their celebrated marriage barely 20 months earlier, the two of them had been out of each other's sight only when affairs of state commanded their separation. For the past fortnight, the king had been compelled by royal obligation to remain within easy traveling distance of the castle, while his queen journeyed to the far heartland of their realm on a mission of great diplomacy and urgency. For there was a great war. The kingdom was being attacked by forces of evil, and the king and queen had drawn their country together in spirit, even as the details of fighting that war tore the royal couple apart. The queen missed her king with equal fire. The duty that took her away was a personal appearance at a rally to raise money for the war effort. January 16, 1942, was just 5 weeks into the war. Already the kingdom was unified through a well-run campaign of public support and patriotism. The entire court had been dispatched to crisscross the country, bolstering unanimity and asking the citizenry to pay money, in addition to their taxes, in order to keep their nation alive and stave off the collapse of the free world. The Queen's mission took her to the town of Indianapolis in the state of Indiana. Her appearance drew thousands of people, and as she ended her impassioned speech, she told them all,
"And leaving you now, I want you all to join me in raising your hands and making the sign of victory. The V sign popularized by our famous ally across the sea, Winston Churchill. Heads and hands up, America. Let's give a rousing cheer that'll be heard in Berlin and Tokyo. Go on!
They cheered with the last of their breath and emptied the last of their purses at the Queen's behest. Climbing weakly down the unpolished wooden steps from the hastily constructed stage, she turned to her friend and courtier, Otto Winkler, and asked, "Do we have the plane tickets yet?" "Almost," said Winkler, who in addition to his friendship was in charge of the public relations. "TWA Flight 3 will take us back to Burbank. They're confirming now. Are you sure you want to fly?" "What's the matter?" asked the blonde regent with a mixture of charm and sass that had endeared her to millions. "You chicken?" "Yes," Otto stated flatly. "Both your mother and I don't want to fly. We've got train reservations. Why not take that? Trains don't fall out of the sky. But planes are faster," she said, "and Clark is waiting." She didn't have to say it. Everyone knew. She and the king had been an item even before they married, but since their union had become official, what belonged to one belonged to the other, including their retinues. Technically, Otto belonged to the king, but he was pleased to be seconded to his queen and surrendered to her charm. "Okay," he sighed. "Are you all packed?" "I've never had the chance to unpack during this whole goddamn schlep," the queen smiled, or tried to smile through her exhaustion. Nobody took her profanity seriously. When she really let it fly, she hit home. But casual swearing was as natural to her as an affectionate pat on the back, which Otto took this to be. He marveled at her fortitude and noted that it was entirely in keeping with her indomitable character. "Anyway," he reasoned, "you can sleep on the plane. It's only 18 hours. 18 hours from here to Burbank? Questioned Elizabeth Peters, the Queen's mother. "I could thumb a ride faster on Route 66. Otto was prepared with an airline itinerary. Flight 3 bounces in St. Louis, Albuquerque, Las Vegas, and God knows where else. Then it's over the Rockies and finally into Burbank. "That's what I call a milk run," said the Queen. "Is there any way to land sooner?" "We could set her down in the Grand Canyon," Otto joked. "Any more bright ideas?" He was respectful but never sycophantic. As the small royal group was hustled into the limousine that would take them to the hotel, and then to the airport, a uniformed woman urgently rushed to them. "We just got a tally, Mr. Winkler," the woman said. "Miss Lombard raised $2 million today. That's a record." "It's just the start," Carol responded. "As soon as I can get my lazy-ass husband to go out on the road with me, we'll beat Hitler with a checkbook." The uniformed woman's face froze. She wasn't sure whether to laugh at Lombard's wisecrack or take offense at its vulgarity. Or maybe she was mulling the possibility of meeting the Queen's husband sometime down the road. "Thank you, soldier," Winkler said. "I'm sure Jimmy Fiddler and the other columnists will be just as overjoyed as we are to learn that. We'll take the opportunity of telling them so you won't have to bother. Thanks for the swell send-off." On the way back to the hotel, a stern-looking Mrs. Peters turned to her daughter. "You can't talk like that," she lectured the star. "This isn't one of your studio crews that knows you. This is your public." "Talk like what?" Carol said, the picture of innocence. "Lazy-ass husband," her mother repeated. "You can tell any of us that Clark is your lazy-ass husband because we all know he isn't, and we also know that it's a joke. But suppose some local reporter asked that girl what you said to her. It'll be in all the papers. I'll say something." Winkler's thoughts were elsewhere. Even though the free-spirited Lombard wasn't an MGM star, the studio had attached Winkler to her Bond tour to run interference. He was Clark Gable's personal publicist, and they were friends, and Gable knew Carol would be in good hands. Back in Culver City, Gable was still shooting Somewhere I'll Find You, and the studio's publicity chief, Howard Strickling, was ever vigilant about Lombard's loose lips. As much as he admired her spunk, he cringed at her lack of discretion and didn't want any of her zingers to compromise his own press work for Gable. Otto was weighing whether to tell Strickling about Carol's gaffe or wait to see what happened in print. He was confident that no family newspaper would print such a vulgarism, but the Hollywood gossip mill was something else. It would wait. The Douglas DC-3 382 Sky Cub propliner was scheduled to arrive from New York in time for a 4 a.m. departure from Indianapolis. Lombard, Peters, Winkler, and their party joined the passengers who were already aboard the transcontinental flight under the piloting of 41-year-old Captain Wayne C. Williams. If Williams had any foreknowledge of his illustrious passenger list, it would not have impressed him. The New York to L.A. run was old hat as far as he was concerned, and celebrities had been turning from train to air travel ever since it had been commercially offered in 1934. Williams had been with TWA since 1931 and had logged thousands of hours for them, many at the controls of the DC-3. There was one curious asterisk on his record, however. In 1933, he'd been fired for changing his flight plan without authorization. He'd been restated after a hearing, and thereafter stuck to the rules. The flight, though prestigious, was nevertheless a physical ordeal. It would take up to 24 hours, more if the weather interfered and caused layovers. Many people still preferred the train, which, while slower, at least afforded them comfort. In addition, movie stars took the train when they wanted to get noticed. The press routinely haunted the Pasadena Railroad Station looking for celebrities, and the celebrities routinely obliged with a smile and a wave from the end of the Pullman car. It was an honorable bargain. Their faces sold papers, the papers sold their faces. In an era when each of Los Angeles's half-dozen papers put out several editions a day, by the time the train chugged from Pasadena into downtown Union Station, the extra would be on the streets touting the celebrity's arrival. But publicity wasn't on Carol's mind. She wanted to be back in Clark's arms, or more specifically his bed, and the plane was mightier than the train. Flight TWA-3 took off as scheduled from Indianapolis and made its wee-hour stops along the way, including Albuquerque, New Mexico. When they landed there, the station agent boarded the plane. "I'm sorry to inconvenience you," he told the groggy passengers, "but I'm afraid I need to requisition your seats." "What's the problem?" Otto stepped in. "No problem, sir," the station agent said, "but we have several servicemen who have to get back to Los Angeles, and under War Department rules, they're allowed to displace civilians on commercial flights like this." "Do you know who this woman is?" asked Bess Peters, nodding toward her daughter. "Yes," the station agent said. "I'm sorry, Miss Lombard, but there's a war on." "A war is what I just raised $2 million to fight," the actress said politely but firmly. "Doesn't that count for anything?" Before the station agent could answer, Otto Winkler offered, "Miss Lombard is as crucial to the war effort in her way as these soldiers are in theirs. I should think the War Department would understand allowing us to continue." "But, sir," the station agent attempted. "Meaning no disrespect," Otto continued in his business voice, "let me put it another way. You can call the War Department, or MGM can call the War Department, and we'll see who gets through first." It was no contest. "Very well, sir," the station agent said, "but I'll have to ask the other civilian passengers to deplane." They did without complaint, casting tolerant glances at Carol as they left, and were replaced by an equal number of servicemen. Once airborne, Carol greeted each of the newly seated soldiers and tried to raise their morale as the plane headed west. In the interest of speed, Captain Williams skipped an optional refueling stop in Winslow, Arizona, and proceeded directly to Las Vegas for refueling. There they also changed the flight attendant and co-pilot. At 7 p.m., the flight resumed from Las Vegas Airport. Preparing to overfly the mountains, Williams switched on the extra oxygen supply to help the passengers breathe more easily in the thinning air, even though the cabin was pressurized. Carol tried to nap. She wanted to be alert and fresh when she saw Clark again. As usual, when either of them went out of town, one would wait at the terminal for the other. The A sticker on their car windshields gave them enough gasoline for such pleasantries, even in the face of wartime rationing. Such was the privilege of fame. The flight gained altitude. It yawed slightly in the updrafts that blew up from the mountains. It was too dark to find the skyline through the windows, and there were no city lights to be seen from the sparsely settled land at the base of Potosi Mountain. They leveled at 7,770 feet when the airline, its fuel, and all souls aboard slammed nose first without warning into the side of the mountain. Another 80 feet, and they would have cleared the peak. The aircraft was going at 200 miles an hour when its fuel tanks, still freshly filled from the Las Vegas airport, exploded on impact. The shattering fuselage repelled off the steep cliff, accelerated by the fireball, and splayed over the broad mountain. The cold January weather had brought a snowfall that cushioned the sound of falling debris, which included body parts from Lombard, Winkler, Peters, Pilot Williams, 2 crew members, and the 16 other passengers and servicemen who died in an instant of history. When Flight 3 failed to contact the control tower at Burbank Airport, officials feared the worst. Clark Gable, waiting at the Lockheed terminal to greet Lombard, heard the mumbled conversation of gate personnel and approached them to ask if there was some kind of trouble. When told that Lombard's flight was missing, he immediately chartered a plane for Las Vegas.